Picture this, it is the dead of winter, frost on the ground, the beds bare, the pots empty, and the shop charging a small fortune for limp-bagged salad flown halfway around the world. The garden looks stone dead, and everybody says nothing grows now, come back in spring. And in that frozen, written-off garden I am going to show you 7 vegetables you can grow and harvest so well you would stop buying them, counted down to the one that turns the whole thing on its head, because here is what almost nobody believes. There is a whole side of the vegetable shop that does not just survive a hard frost, it gets sweeter for it, because the plant floods itself with sugar as a natural antifreeze, so the cold that supposedly kills the garden is exactly what makes these crops taste their best. There are crops everyone swears are dead by November that stand out there in the frost like a living larder for months, and winter is the laziest, most forgiving gardening of the whole year because the cold does half the work for you. Let me show you the fast one first because it is the moment it flips in your head. You walk out into the frost, brush a little snow off a low cover by the back door, and cut a full bowl of crisp, sweet winter salad leaves about a minute from the cold ground to your plate, on a day the whole world swears nothing is growing. That is not a fantasy, and it is not a trick. And I will be honest with you in one sentence up front. In the coldest, darkest weeks, the growth almost stops, so most of this is hardy crops you get going in autumn that then hold and sweeten through the cold under a bit of cheap cover, and a long, hard freeze means you harvest around it, not a field of tomatoes in January, but the whole leafy, root and herb side of the shopping keeps feeding you right through the frost, because winter beats a summer bed at the 3 things that matter most for those crops. The cold makes them sweeter, flooding kale and leeks and roots with sugar instead of turning them bitter. The cold stores them for you, holding hardy crops fresh in the ground for months, so you pick them the day you want them, and the cold fights your battles, knocking the aphids and slugs flat and doing your watering with rain and snow. Give winter the crops that were built for it instead of the ones that were not, and it feeds you. So here is the countdown, 7 vegetables you can grow in the dead of winter and stop buying, starting at number 7 with the fastest win of the lot. Number 7 is the fastest proof that a hard frost cannot beat you, and it is the crop that fills the exact gap that hurts most in winter: fresh salad leaves. I am starting here because most people quit before they ever believe a frozen garden can feed them, and a shallow tray of hardy winter leaves gives you the answer while the shop is charging the most it charges all year for a bag of the stuff. Forget the soft summer lettuce that flops at the first frost. You sow the tough winter crew instead, the ones bred for the cold: corn salad, also sold as lamb's lettuce, winter purslane, landcress, mizuna, and the hardy mustards. Scatter the seed thin across a shallow trough or tray of loose soil in early autumn. Stand it somewhere it catches what little light there is, a cold windowsill, a porch, or under a clear cover outside, and it just keeps going. Here is why the cold wins for winter salad, and it is the surprise that sets up the whole video. The moment a light frost touches these leaves, the plant pulls sugar up into them as antifreeze, so they come out of the cold crisper and sweeter, not slimy and bitter like the bag in your fridge. A cheap sheet of clear plastic or fleece thrown over the top on the hardest nights, what gardeners call a cloche, and they crop for weeks. And here is the trick most people get wrong. They grow a whole lettuce, wait for a head, and cut it down, and it is gone. Instead, you sow close and harvest, cut and come again, taking only the outer leaves and leaving the little growing point in the middle, so one autumn sowing hands you salad deep into the cold, not one bowl. A winter tray hands you your first crop, the exact bagged salad you rebuy and watch go slimy every single trip, cut fresh from the frost. But if hardy salad is the fastest thing out there, the next number is the leafy green everyone is certain dies at the first freeze and quietly stands through the whole of it. Number 6 is the greens that laugh at a frost. Number 6 is the pile of tender greens you buy in a plastic bag, use a handful of, and find turn to slime 3 days later, and the winter hardy kinds shrug off the cold that everybody thinks flattens them, real winter spinach and the hardy oriental greens. In summer these are a nightmare. They bolt in the heat, throw up a seed stalk, turn bitter, and are over in a fortnight. Sow the right varieties in autumn instead: proper hardy winter spinach, mizuna, mustard greens, winter hardy pak choi, and something changes completely. Here is why the cold wins, and it is the whole point of this number. These plants make their own antifreeze, pulling sugar into the leaves so the cell walls do not burst in a frost, which means they sit out there tough, mild, and standing for months while the summer versions are a distant memory. They are not racing to seed, because nothing bolts in the cold, so they just hold, leaf after leaf, waiting for you. Sow a run of them along a trough in autumn, throw a bit of fleece or a cloche over them when a hard freeze is coming, and take the outer leaves whenever you want them. Here is the spike: a couple of troughs of hardy greens can keep handing you fresh spinach and leaves right through the frost, the exact salad bag greens that are the worst value and the fastest to rot in the whole shop, from a garden the whole street has written off for the winter. But the next number is the flavor you overpay for, the very worst of all by weight, and a good half of it sits out there green and alive while the snow falls. Number 5 is the fresh flavor you keep paying a fortune for. Number 5 is the corner of the shop you overpay for the worst: the fresh herbs, and a surprising amount of it stays alive and pickable straight through the cold. Think about how they sell them: a few cut sprigs sealed in a stiff plastic clamshell, one of the highest prices by weight in the whole store, and they turn to slime in the fridge in days, so half of every pack goes in the bin, and in winter it is imported and dearer still. And here is the surprise that makes this number perfect for the cold. The woody herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, and bay, are evergreen. They barely even notice the winter, sitting there green and fragrant in a pot by the door for you to snip on the darkest day of the year. Parsley is properly hardy too, and stands right through the frost, and a pot of it will keep you in the herb you actually use most. Stand pots of the ones you cook with most, where they get a little shelter against a wall or by the back door, and they hold. Here is the spike, and it is almost too easy. A handful of these herb pots costs about what a few of those clamshells do, except they never stop, and the woody ones will sit there green through years of winters, not days in a fridge. And the onions do the same trick. Hardy spring onions sown in autumn stand through the cold to pull fresh in the depths of winter, and the white root ends of the ones you buy will regrow in a pot on the sill, so that little patch of flavor is effectively free. Fresh flavor from the crop your winter cannot kill, and free onions from your scraps. But the next number is the one crop that just stands out there in the frozen ground like a fridge that lives outside, waiting for you to pull it. Number 4 is the living larder of the winter garden. Number 4 is the crop that just stands out in the frost waiting for you, the one that treats the frozen ground as its own outdoor fridge: the leek. If there is one classic workhorse of the winter garden, this is it. You get leeks going in the warmer months, and then, and this is the whole magic of them, you simply leave them standing in their pot or bed right through the winter and pull them one at a time as you actually want them. They do not rot and they do not soften, they just wait in the cold, fresh and perfect, for weeks and months. Here is why the cold wins for leeks, and it is the reason they belong on every winter list. The frozen ground is the best fridge you will ever own, so instead of harvesting everything and watching it wilt, you leave the whole crop living and take exactly what you need for tonight's pot. And a hard frost only sweetens them, mellowing that raw oniony bite into something sweet and gentle that a supermarket leek, cut weeks ago and shipped cold, simply cannot match. Grow them in a deep pot or bag, a good few to a container. Blanch the stems sweet and white by mounding a little soil up around them as they grow, and then just leave them out there as your standing supply. Here is the spike: A single deep container of Leeks can hand you the base of soup after soup across the whole winter, pulled fresh in the snow, the exact vegetable that is dear and tired-looking in the shop in the very months your own are standing there perfect. But if the leek is the larder that holds, the next number is the leafy backbone that refuses to die back when everything around it has given up. Number 3 is the green that keeps standing all winter. Number 3 is the leafy backbone that keeps standing when everything else has given up, chard and perpetual spinach. Here is the whole secret and the reason to lean on them through the cold. Chard, perpetual spinach, and leaf beet are tough, deep-rooted leaf crops, and where a soft summer green collapses at the first hard frost, these dig in and hold. In a mild winter, or with a cloche or a bit of fleece over them, they keep cropping leaf after leaf right through the cold, and even when a really savage freeze knocks the top growth back, the crown sits alive in the soil and pushes a fresh flush the moment the weather softens, so you are picking again while everyone else is still waiting for spring. This is the surprise that makes them worth a spot. They sit through the frost and push new leaves the moment it eases, so a single autumn planting can feed you across the back of winter and straight into the new year from one set of roots. Plant a few chard and perpetual spinach in a deeper trough or a big pot, cut the outer leaves as you need them, and leave the heart to keep pushing. Here is the spike. A handful of these plants in a pot by the wall can hand you cooking greens through the leanest months of the year, the exact chard and spinach that cost a fortune fresh and wilt in a day, from a garden that is supposedly finished for the season. The toughest, most reliable leaf you can grow turns out to be the one that carries you through the winter, but if chard is the backbone that holds, the crop at number 2 is the one plant that a hard frost does not just survive but genuinely improves. Number 2 is the king of the winter pot. Before I count down the last 2, stop and look at what that frozen garden is already holding. A tray of crisp, sweet winter salad, a run of hardy spinach and greens standing through the frost, pots of evergreen herbs and overwintering onions you overpay for the worst, a deep container of leeks waiting in the cold like a living larder, and a backbone of chard and perpetual spinach cropping through the leanest months. That is already the freshest and some of the most expensive corners of the cart, all grown in the dead of winter, in a garden everybody told you was dead, and the last 2 numbers are the heavy hitters, the 2 that actually earn the word never, the one leafy plant a hard frost makes sweeter instead of killing, and at number 1, the boring heavy staple you lug home in a sack, grown and stored right there in the frozen soil with no fridge and no fork in the ground. Quick question while we are here, and I do read every reply. What is the one fresh thing you hate paying winter prices for the most? Tell me in the comments, I am genuinely curious. Now, number 2. Number 2 is the king of the winter pot. The one plant a hard frost does not kill but genuinely improves, kale. If you grow one single thing through the cold, make it this. Kale is a tough, leafy brassica, and it is at its absolute best in the depths of winter when almost nothing else is standing. Everything the chard does, the kale does with even more muscle, and it does the one thing that makes it the star of the whole cold season. Stand one kale plant in a decent pot, and here is why it belongs so high on the countdown. A hard frost turns kale sweeter, not tougher. The plant floods its leaves with sugar to survive the freeze, so the exact cold snap that everybody thinks would kill it is what turns it from a slightly bitter summer leaf into something genuinely sweet and delicious at the very time a bag of it in the shop is at its dearest. And it is a cut-and-come-again machine that does not quit. You pick the lower leaves as you need them, and the plant keeps pushing new ones from the top, straight through the cold, often for months. Here is the spike. One healthy kale plant in a winter pot can quietly replace a rebought bag of greens week after week through the whole cold season, and every frost only makes the next picking sweeter. A couple of plants and you have stopped buying leafy greens for the hardest months of the year from a garden under frost. But the crop at number 1 is the one that flips the whole idea in your head, the heaviest, most boring thing in your trolley, grown and then stored for you by the frost itself, with no digging and no fridge. Here is number 1. Number 1 is the heavy bag of roots you lug home every single week, the carrots, the parsnips, the swede and beetroot, and growing them into the winter is the moment the whole thing clicks. Now here is the honest bit that makes this the perfect number 1. You do not sow these in the snow, you get them going in the warmer months, and the magic is what winter does to a crop you simply leave in the ground. Because here is the trick no shop can copy. Hardy roots do not need lifting and storing, you leave them right where they grew, and the cold soil keeps them perfect for months. A root cellar with no cellar, and the frost does something a supermarket never can. When a hard frost hits, the plant turns its starch straight into sugar to stop its own cells freezing, so a parsnip or a carrot lifted after the first frosts is markedly sweeter than the same root pulled in the warmth. The reason a frosted parsnip is a proper winter treat and a bagged one is not. Grow them in deep, loose, stone-free bags so they come up long and straight instead of forking. Cover the soil with a thick blanket of straw or fleece so you can still get a fork in when the top inch freezes solid, and then just lift what you need, when you need it, all winter. Here is the payoff I opened the whole video on the coldest, deadest day of the year, when the shop is at its most expensive and everything in it was picked weeks ago. You pull a clean bunch of sweet, crisp carrots and parsnips straight out of the frozen ground, the heaviest, most rebought corner of the whole cart, grown and stored and sweetened by a season that supposedly grows nothing. That is number 1, and that is the countdown. Now here is how you run all 7 so it actually replaces the shopping instead of just decorating a frozen yard. Here is the part that ties 7 crops into one working winter garden instead of 7 separate pots, and it is the reason a frozen yard can genuinely keep you out of the vegetable aisle in the months it costs the most. The whole thing comes down to one idea. You do not fight the winter, you grow the crops that were built for it, and you get them going before the cold, not during it. So the system is 4 simple rules. First, plant in autumn for winter. The single biggest mistake is waiting for the cold to arrive, so you get the hardy crew, the salad, the greens, the leeks, the chard, the kale, the roots, established while there is still some warmth and light, and then let the winter hold and sweeten them. Second, keep a bit of cheap cover to hand, a cloche, a sheet of fleece, a cold frame, or just a cold windowsill and a porch, none of it heated, just enough to take the edge off the hardest nights and keep the leaves croppable. Third, and this is the quiet gift of the whole build, do almost nothing. The cold does your watering, kills your pests, and stores your harvest, so a winter garden is the most forgiving there is. You are mostly just walking out and picking. Fourth, the big one, harvest little and often and leave the rest standing. The whole point is that the garden is the fridge, so you pull one leek, cut a few outer leaves, lift a couple of roots, exactly what tonight needs, and leave everything else living and holding in the cold for next week. Do those 4 things and the frozen garden is always holding something to eat, which is the only way 7 crops add up to a real dent in the winter shopping. And one quiet bonus of building it all in pots and bags, nothing is dug in or permanent. You can drag a pot into the shelter of the wall when a real freeze threatens, and if you ever move, the whole winter garden comes with you. So that is the countdown, 7 vegetables you can grow in the dead of winter and stop buying. Crisp, sweet winter salad for your fast first win, a run of hardy spinach and greens that laugh at a frost, the evergreen herbs and overwintering onions you overpay for the worst, a deep pot of leeks standing in the cold like a living larder, a backbone of chard and perpetual spinach through the leanest months, the container king kale that a frost only makes sweeter, and at number 1 the heavy roots, carrots and parsnips you pull sweet and clean straight out of the frozen ground. This channel is called 1 Acre Blueprint, and by now the real lesson is clear. The blueprint was never really about the acre, and it was never about the perfect season or the warm, easy months. It is about how hard each square foot works, and even a frozen, written-off yard in the dead of winter, planted with the crops that were built for the cold instead of the ones that were not, can keep a family out of the vegetable aisle in the exact months it costs the most. Do not try to build all 7 at once. Start with one before the cold sets in, a tray of hearty winter salad, or a single kale plant that a frost turns sweeter, or a deep pot of leeks that will stand out there feeding you all winter. Subscribe to stay on the 1 Acre Blueprint, because next we take this exact idea to its limit, into the smallest space of all, a single windowsill indoors, and the fresh food you can keep cutting there when there is no garden at all. And tell me in the comments, of these 7, which would you grow in your winter first?